Here's another one. This Tate case that's getting all the press because of this kid who has been refused to go to his prom. And by the way, he looks like such a nice kid, this James Tate. You know, and so does his girlfriend. They present themselves as such a nice little couple. And he's just saying, I want this to be over. Please let it be over. Can I just please go to the prom? One of the radio stations up in that area is offering to do a competing prom and saying, don't go to your school prom, come to my prom. I figured good promotion. We're not doing it here, but an FM up there is doing it up in Shelton. You know, once again, a person sitting on her hands, even though she knows she's wrong. You know, my father always has a saying. He always says, people know when they're doing the wrong thing, but they do it anyway. This woman, Beth Smith, knows she's doing the wrong thing. Her mayor has told her. There are legislators in Connecticut who don't want to pass bills, you know, to supersede her authority on this. Everybody has told her that she's doing the wrong thing. People have sat her down and they've told her she's doing the wrong thing. She knows it in her gut, but she doesn't have the courage of the strength or the humility and the lack of arrogance to say, I made a mistake, I was too harsh, I was angry that he broke the rules. On reconsideration, he can go to the prom. That's all she needs to say. You want to hear two more instances? They're even more local here in Norwalk. You've got Tanya McDowell, who had the temerity and the audacity to do something that 26 other parents this year alone in Norwalk have done, which is to lie about her address so her kid could go to school there. Now, what makes it complicated about Tanya McDowell are two other factors. Usually when people lie about their address, they actually live someplace else. In Tanya McDowell's case, we're not convinced that she lives anyplace else. She has an address once in a while in Bridgeport. She has an address once in a while in Norwalk at the homeless shelter. She says she lives in her van a lot of the time. So number one, you have the situation of a child who, according to actually the McKinney-Vento Act, is entitled by federal law to be able to go to school where a homeless parent decides that it's best for the child to go. And then you also have a situation where she's the only one of these 27 parents to be prosecuted by being threatened to go to jail versus being asked to politely and nicely disenroll her child. So you have a situation where a mother is being treated differently and more harshly and is homeless and is poor. Okay? All of these things, you would think that our mayor, that our district attorney would put their heads together. The fact that they happen to be father and stepdaughter, also, they're very close. They could be talking about this and say, you know what? We made a mistake. The case came to us through a different way than normally these cases come to us. On reconsideration, we're dropping criminal charges. The child has already been disenrolled as of January, and we need to find a way to help this family. That's the compassionate, prudent response to this situation. That's what we're supposed to do. That would require humility. That would require flexibility of judgment. That would require the kind of judgment that took into account these factors and this case. And it would also be a step back from an abuse of power. Because when a prosecutor singles out one person to prosecute for a crime, when 26 other people have done it and they don't get prosecuted for a crime, that's an abuse of power, right? That's what it is. So that's the third instance. Would you like to hear the fourth instance? And these are just coming to mind. I have no script in front of me. These are just from my mental memory of the last couple of weeks on the show. Here's another one. Scruffy the dog. The Yorkshire Terrier. The Yorkshire Terrier who peed on his own lawn and his own sidewalk in front of his own house, whose owner said, you know what? I don't want to put a collar on my Yorkie when I let her out to pee. That's for slaves. I just love that he said that's for slaves. I just love that. Because I, too, look at Sugar as a non-slave, but she does wear a collar. And that's because I'm afraid if she scampers off to somebody else's lawn that, you know, they need to know where to find me in case that happens. Anyway, here's what happened. The animal control officer in Norwalk knew because a neighbor ran out shouting, wait a minute, that's the house of the dog. Didn't knock on the front door of the owner of the house, picked the Yorkie up in both hands, took him down to the pound. The owner appeared within 20 minutes. He must have been frantic and angry and upset. The animal control officer said, "You're in violation of the law. The dog needs a license. The dog needs a collar. The dog needs a leash. The dog is a menace to public safety." Could you imagine? The dog is a menace to public safety. Oh, by the way, that's what Beth Smith, the headmaster of Shelton, said this morning, too. Said that the violation of the "will you come with me to the prom" on the wall of Shelton High School was a danger to public safety. You know they're in trouble when we're all in trouble when our public officials cite as a danger to public safety Scruffy the Yorkshire Terrier and a sign on a wall that says, "will you come with me to the prom?" If this is their notion of public safety danger, I don't want to know where Al-Qaeda fits into this. I don't want to know where real danger, where people bombing synagogues fit into this. Forget about common sense. There's no sense at all. Common or otherwise. Uncommon or otherwise. So that's the fourth instance. So the animal control officer fines a man $200 to pick up his dog and says the dog could have been a menace to public safety. I can't make it up. These are all within the last couple of weeks on this show. I interviewed a long time ago a guy named Philip Howard, and he wrote this marvelous book on the death of common sense in America. If you get a chance, you should read it. He's a lawyer, as am I, and he cites case after case, instance after instance, where this country is going to the dogs because we've lost any notion of common sense. Abuse of power, discernment, judgment, adulthood versus childhood. When we become adults, it's not supposed to be about the letter of the law. I'm going to digress for a little bit because a little bit of my political science training is coming into me. And if I go a little highbrow on you, I apologize, and you can bring me back down to earth. But when I was in college, I remember learning that there was the positive law theory of justice and the natural law theory of justice. Do you remember this? This was Hobbes versus Locke, John Locke versus Hobbes. I think it's Thomas Hobbes. It was Hobbesian versus Lockean theory of justice. And here's where it comes. The idea was, and the comparison in your head was between the American system and the Nazi Germany system, okay? The positive law theory of justice says that if it's a law, it needs to be respected because it's a law. It needs to be enforced because it's a law. And it is correct and right because it's a law. Because it's a law, it is therefore right and true and just and must always be enforced. That's the positive rule theory of justice. The natural law theory of justice is that just because somebody writes it down and makes it a law doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. That there is a moral superiority. There is a moral law that supersedes what people may write down. So, for example, the classic instance were the Nuremberg laws passed in 1933 in Germany. The Nuremberg laws that said that all Jews needed to wear a yellow star, that no Jews could enter university, that no Jews could be professionals, that no Jews could marry non-Jews. All of these laws, there were many, many of them. And under the theory of those laws, under the positive law theory of justice, because the German legislature had passed the laws, therefore they had to be obeyed, therefore they were correct and just. Therefore the German people who adhered to them could look at themselves and say, we obeyed the law, we did the right thing. You understand? That's the positive law theory. The natural law theory, which is what America was founded on, our Declaration of Independence, our 10th Amendment Bill of Rights, would say, we don't care what the legislature wrote down. You can't make a law that says that Jews can't enter universities because they're Jews, and Jews can't marry non-Jews because they're an inferior race. Because God's law, the moral law, the law that is superior to that, is greater than that, is more true, is more just, is more right than that. And therefore, we have a right to civilly disobey that law. The entire paradigm of civil disobedience comes from if you believe that there is a natural right theory of justice, if you believe in John Locke, if you really believe and understand the way our Constitution was written and how it was framed. Because under that, it doesn't matter what laws are passed. If they're not just, they don't have to be obeyed. And therefore, the sit-ins in Selma and the marches on Washington and the civil disobedience and the nonviolent acts of Martin Luther King were totally correct, were totally right, were totally just. They were in keeping with the natural law theory of justice, that just because there was a law in the South that said that blacks had to be in one water fountain and whites had to be in another didn't mean that you had to obey. And I go back to that when it comes to abuse of power. Because this abuse of power seems to me standing on people who stand on letters of law. The laws are made for reasons, but you always have to look to the reasons in enforcing the law. We have a leash law about dogs because we don't want stray German Shepherds, for example, running around town. I'm not saying all German Shepherds could be angry, but as a rule, that breed could be a lot more scary to people than Malteses and Yorkshire Terriers. I mean, let's use common sense. So therefore, if you saw a stray dog walking around and you didn't see a neighbor that pointed to a house that said that person owns that German Shepherd, then under those circumstances, animal control would take the dog off the streets and bring it to a place where then he could choose and find the owner, right? Same thing. We're talking common sense on the Lisa Wexler Show.